Not seeing the intro video. There we go.
There we go. And we'll forego the intro, but I do want to take a deep breath with you this afternoon, or I guess it's this morning for you, Mike. So if you can, would you do the simultaneous sigh with me this morning?
Totally.
I think I need it.
All right.
All right. Well, let's blow all our air out. Take a deep breath together. Hold it and release. I needed to take a deep breath. I'm a little tense, and a little frustrated. I was telling you before we got on the air about my dealings with these chickens. But how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. It's been an interesting week of healing and suffering and hanging out, and it's kind of a wide variety of things going on. I feel a little, like emotion
Scattered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay, but like kind of interior kaleidoscoping happening.
Yeah. It can be difficult to navigate because, like, how do you get out of that? What is something that centers you?
Prayer, and it tends to be different things at different moments. Like one thing I've noticed, just to clarify, is Buddhists and Eastern religions use the term meditation to refer to a really wide variety of practices, and Catholics use the word prayer to refer to a really wide variety of practices. So I didn't know this until I became a Catholic, because I thought the word prayer specifically meant something verbal, or even like verbal in thought, like talking to God silently in your head or something like that. But a lot of Eastern religions call meditation, Catholics call prayer of one form
Prayer.
or another. So when I say prayer, that's what I mean. I mean meditation, and then like also verbal prayers, or like thinking about some truth or some comforting, thing to remember. And my wife is this will be relevant, I promise. My wife is an Enneagram coach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she uses the Enneagram personality typing model to help people figure out like the very high ROI things that they can do to heal. You are specifically, you have this emotional architecture that works in this way, and you don't have to trust all the advice in the world. Just do this tiny little change and talk to me next week, because things will be a little different. Like you'll feel it right away. So it's very high ROI, like healing consultation and stuff like that.
That's interesting. I worked under one of my supervisors when I was a counselor. Was She'd written a book about Winnie the Pooh and the different Winnie the Pooh characters and the Enneagram.
Oh,
And
wow.
we dug deep into. I'm a recovering 3. And I don't know why I said recovering, but 3s, are like helpers.
That's a cute way to say it. I totally get what you mean. We're all recovering. I think that's great.
And so I love the Enneagram. I do think there is a group of people that get a little too into it, or put a little too much stock into it. I like the idea of what you're talking about. What she does is the real practical aspect of what is like looking at it, who you are, and the smallest thing I can do for the most gain. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Is she a counselor? I mean, I guess in some form or fashion.
Not in an incredibly formal or clinical way. She kind of describes herself as a life coach, because she wants to be able to help people without having the legal obligations that come with licensing and all that stuff. But
I fully back that.
Sweet. I mentioned that to be a little more precise in answering the question you asked, which is how do I ground myself?
Mm.
And one of the things that she does really well is she helps people identify specific lies or falsehoods that we're secretly
Mm.
believing and are that are like motivating all kinds of compensation. And one of the things that grounds me a lot is remembering the truth that is true in place of that lie. Like, for
Yeah.
example, I, as a recovering four,
Oh,
uh, I have one
yeah.
particular five wound of feeling like I don't have enough. Like, since I'm married,
Mm.
I can't be a monk, so I won't have enough like spiritual privilege to be as holy as I want to be is like a big one that keeps coming up. I won't have enough
Mm.
opportunities. I won't have enough success. If I don't, help every homeless person I see, I won't have done enough in God's eyes, blah, blah, blah. So I have this kind of nagging lie that I don't have enough. So one thing
Hmm.
that grounds me is just kind of meditating on accepting the reality that I do have enough. God,
Mm.
God's provision is absolutely abundant, let alone, sufficient. And I can rest in that. And when I think about that, I remember that it's true, but it takes a little effort and it counteracts that lie that is constantly kind of giving me false, agitated motivations.
I like that. So that gives you a specific
Yeah.
thing to meditate on, to focus on,
Yeah.
and I think it's really good. I'm actually another friend of the show. I think you get along with him, Josh Blackburn. He's Eastern Orthodox, and he's been trying to convert me to Eastern Orthodox since he became an Eastern Orthodox. But he sent me a book recently on prayer. Eastern Orth is several priests talking about prayer and in categories, and they get to what you're talking about or what you mentioned earlier. They talk. There's a whole section about solitude and quiet and the importance of being alone and with God, and how that fits into prayer. I haven't gotten to that section yet, but I was interested in it. So when I was looking over the book, and I'm curious, to read more about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
um, but I do want to dig deeper into this epistemology of love.
Yeah.
And one of the things I had a revelation this week, thanks to my dad. We were talking about this. We were talking about morality, and I was talking about it, kind of like I was talking with you about how I've been working on this idea of evil and sin being disruption of relationships with God and others, and he pointed out, or he started talking about this idea of disapproval. And man, that really shaped or started to reshape my ideas about what do we do? Because one thing to think of, to develop an epistemology of, or to develop the construct of what does it mean, this idea of evil or sin or love or truth. But what do we do, and how do we influence others towards truth or love or good and in love?
Yeah.
And approval and disapproval started to shape a little bit more about, because approval is like one of those things it's like an action without having any physical movement, right? It's when you approve of something, when somebody approves of something, but it's hard to explain sometimes. I think there are certain things that denote approval or disapproval. However, it is kind of subtle, right? And I guess what is interesting to me is because I've really been thinking about turning on love for somebody and seeking truth through love and what that means. And I think for me at least, this idea of approval, like suddenly like I approve of them. Um there's something in that that I wanted to discuss with you and kind of suss out because I feel like I think it's good to disapprove of something, and that's what we talked about when somebody, I talked about when I'm in when I used to run these peace circles with young men. I used to ask my supervisor, what do I do when they bring up something awful they did at home, or it's something they do and they're bragging about or something like that. And he said, well, it is not your job to disrupt everything in that moment and try to get in a power struggle with them to change their ways. He said, show disapproval and move on. And I thought that was, as small as that was, I thought that was revolutionary for me, because it plays on the idea, and something that I've learned is one of my 5 sermons, is that we have to use the only leverage we have is the leverage of relationship. Outside of that is force, violence, right? I guess we still have that, but it's not in the kingdom of God. Isn't the tool we should be using? Isn't but the leverage of love is. So, anyways, I've been rambling on. What do you get anything out of that? Does anything come up for you as I'm talking?
Yeah, a lot of things.
Hmm.
I forgot them all because I was enjoying what you were saying, and I just didn't.
Oh man, I rambled on too long.
No. There was not rambling. The leverage of like I find that a very interesting thing, especially for a 3 to say, and I wonder what my wife would think about it. So maybe I should connect you guys to talk on one of these sometime. Um,
Yeah, because it could be used as manipulation as well. I think.
right. Anyway, back to the. All right. So maybe you can help
Yeah.
me focus in on like a particular aspect.
So approval
Yeah,
and the action, or the, what would you even call that? I guess it's the
sure.
movement of approval. You know.
Yeah. So this is something that I struggle with because I struggle to feel enough approval myself. I struggle to approve of myself.
Mm,
I've constantly been seeking other people's approval more than like a totally healthy person would. And so
mm,
I struggle to approve and disapprove of other people at a skillful moment, at just the right moment.
mm,
That's not like
mm.
currency that I trade well in. Um, so, I can talk about things that I've heard, um,
Yeah.
like the we have different levels of responsibility for dealing with different people. Like I like the advice that your friend gave you for leading that group. Um, and I think it makes sense that we have to be able to love the person and approve of the person even while we may disagree with or disapprove of the action that they
Mm,
take. Like we don't want to endorse something that's wrong. We don't want to encourage something
yeah.
that's wrong, but we also don't want to make people feel judged, and we don't want to judge people. Uh,
Mm,
like again, this is something that I think the love as epistemology thing comes into play here because I don't think it's possible to really prescribe a course of actions or a set of words in order to do this successfully. I think
mm,
it's a kind of perception, a way of
yeah.
seeing people that can only be built up through practice loving people underneath their actions. Like only
Yeah.
the people will only feel the real thing I don't think there's like a script for how to approve of someone while disapproving of their choices.
That's a good point. How to love people. Yeah. By the way, I messed up. I'm a 2, a recovering 2.
Oh, got it.
Did I
Okay.
say 3?
You did.
If I said 3, I'm a 2.
All right. Okay. Helper. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
My wife is also a 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it can be exhausting. But
Yes.
in personalities, like this is a thing that comes to mind is that there are depending on our personality, it is either easier or harder. It can be easier or harder to orient ourselves towards others in a position of love, in a orientation of love.
Totally.
And even as you were talking about your difficulty with approval for yourself and others, I was thinking about a different test, the DISC, and how they talk about certain personalities that. So there's those that approve of others and approve of themselves. That would be me. Have hard time faulting anybody, and I don't fault myself. And then there's others that, and there's the other. I think it's the S or something, where, or the D actually is where you disapprove of others and you disapprove of yourself, and it's very hard on others, hard on yourself. And then the S is more of hard on yourself, approve of others, and the C, I think, is hard on yourself and hard on others as well, but in a different way. But just that whole thing, that whole idea of our personalities, and I had never thought of that until my wife was talking. She's very into the DISC, DIC. It was the dominant, interpersonal. I forget what S is, but I always remember it's like a.
Yeah, I don't know this model well.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's like dominant. That's like, leaders, very hard on themselves, hard on others. I, interpersonal, very gregarious, easy on themselves, easy on others. S, I forget what the S word is, but I think of it as like a golden retriever, just very loyal, low profile. And C, I think of computer nerd. It's just very detail oriented, high on conscientiousness, low on openness, that kind of thing. And I think you're probably more of an I, right? An I, or probably an S, like very high loyalty, low profile, or
I'm really not sure.
interpersonal.
I'm really not
Be
sure. I
interesting.
can be pretty hard on myself and pretty forgiving of others. I think I'm whatever that, just by the sound of it. Yeah, I
Hard on yourself, forgiving of others. That's I think that would be more of an S. It's interesting. But I do think that, well, like, knowing our personalities and mitigating for, like you're talking about, like your wife does with others, is mitigating for the extremes, right? And I think prayer and meditation, or prayer slash meditation, I think is a very important thing for that. And I guess for the rest of our discussion, that's kind of the direction I'd like to, because I do want to get down to what do we do? Because I so often in these discussions, as getting to the source of rambling, I think ideas are great, but I want to know, how do I live differently, And
Oh.
I think you're onto something when you talk about prayer and meditation, prayer slash meditation, as we orient. I feel like that is the only way to orient ourselves. Well, I'll let you respond. Prayer and meditation, how do we use that to orient ourselves?
To to narrow it down a bit, it's interesting you're talking about personalities because I think it's very helpful to know what kinds of prayer and meditation are well suited to our personalities, because there's the
Mm.
whole universe of advice out there. But if
Mm.
you're not built like Mother Teresa, the advice that people give to people who are built like Mother Teresa is not necessarily the advice that you need. And I've,
Mm.
I've busted my head against walls trying to imitate somebody who is just organized internally very differently from me
Mm.
and doesn't fit right. So I think I found it very helpful to align with people and the wisdom of people who are actually a lot like me personality
Mm.
wise. Um, it's,
Mhm.
it's just been it's been higher ROI, let's say, like rather than
Mm.
trying to be Saint Ignatius or something, I can just chill out and let Saint Therese speak to me and feel understood or something more so more aligned.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I hadn't even thought of that, like finding the right spiritual mentor, the forefather, saint.
yeah.
That's that is awesome because well, and how I guess that strikes questions in my head. What how do you figure out what kind of personality they were? How do
Sure.
you
So there are, I guess, a few different ways. One thing I've learned lately is that saints kind of pick you. It's sort of like wands in Harry Potter. Like when
huh?
you open yourself to that, they'll kind of pick you. They'll show up a bunch of times in your life in like little synchronistic ways. They go,
Hmm.
"Oh, you're reaching out to me, aren't you?" And then you ask for their help with things and ask what they want to teach you, and then lo and behold,
Mm.
there is something. Um, and so just an openness to that has been
Yeah.
huge for me. Um, and they're not all famous. Sometimes they're like obscure saints that I have to look up on Wikipedia, and they're from 500 AD, and nobody knows who they are anymore. Um,
Mm.
but
But I think having like looking and doing that research, looking at the different ones
yeah,
we haven't heard of, that would
some
help,
are,
right? Like,
yeah, some are obvious. Some like you can there's this big contemplative versus active sort of division.
mm,
Mother Teresa spent her whole life in activity, and Saint
mm,
John of the Cross spent his whole life in contemplation, basically.
mm,
And that's a place to start. Are you more of an active or are you more of a contemplative? Uh,
mm.
and that might help narrow some things down. And another is there's a website called, I think it's called personalitydatabase.com or something, personality DB, something like that. Just Google personality database and it'll show up. And
Okay.
you can search for saints and people's, like the community's collective best guess at their personality types according to different models, Enneagram.
Ooh,
They have all that stuff and the reasoning for it. So that's kind of the nerdy way to approach this, is just look at the
I like
database of
that.
personalities and find someone you um,
Hmm.
yeah, but just anybody, like if you read just a couple pages of writings from a wide variety of saints, some of them will
Mhm.
be like, this guy just feels like my friend instantly. I feel
Mm.
understood, and he's describing my issues and my problems. And
Yeah.
just pay attention to those different reactions. And then some people I go, man, this guy's really inspiring and awesome, and I wish I was like him. And I try and try and try and cannot be like him. He's just built different.
Mm.
Just can't do it. It's not who I am,
Mm.
even though I might be like impressed or something. So
Yeah.
there's like a sensitivity there. Uh,
Mm.
like which ones feel like the natural you, um, and speak to your heart.
I like that. And in that, so so in the meditation, in the prayer time, is this a matter of praying to a saint,
Sometimes it's
or is
either.
there some reading, or go ahead.
Yeah, it could be a wide variety of things like that. But when I'm, praying to or asking help from a saint in prayer, it's just kind of like, asking your friend to talk to the boss. If you have connections upstairs, it's the leverage of relationships.
Hmm.
Feel a kinship with the saint if they kind of reach out to you, or if you want help with something that they specialize in. If you want to, if you want to help the poor, ask Mother Teresa for advice. If you want to help with meditation, ask Saint John of the Cross.
Hmm.
You can you can you can ask them for help, and with their virtues and with their relationships with God and with each other, because they're up there in a family
Hmm.
hanging out with God. So it's not like by
Hmm.
asking a saint, you're not asking God, or you're like committing idolatry. Not at all. They all share in God's will. So there's not a disagreement between what any of
Right.
them, would do for you.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily agree that they're all up there walking around, but one thing that I think is super important is that the words of our mouth and meditation of our hearts are focused in on that which is righteous, right? I read something the other day, is whatever you're spending your time on. I mean, this is, of course, you could see this anywhere, right? But whatever you're spending your time on, that's what you're going to become. And you watch enough. I use I statements. I watch enough Google short. What is it called? YouTube Shorts or something like that, and that's probably where I heard that line. But that's, if I spend my time on that, I'll become a superficial 5-second or 30-second talking head. That's not what I want to become. I want to become a saint, and in order to become a saint, I got to spend time with the saint. I got to spend time, words of my mouth, talking about saints and thinking about saints, and in the meditations of my heart, just dwelling on sainthood and what that means. And I think that's incredibly important as we try to, if I'm going to be able to reorient myself on command with somebody, I have to have something to tap into. I'm not, who is it? Dallas Willard. I forget what book, but I remember him saying that it's impossible to reorient yourself, or decide in the moment to choose righteousness, that it is something that you build over time. And when it comes down to the moment when we need to choose righteousness, we better have been building up a fortress. We're building, I was talking to my dad, of building up that machine of righteousness in our lives, in our hearts, for the Spirit to work through, for Jesus to work through. Otherwise, it's like, hey, I've got this murky heart of Hollywood. Lord, use it to,
Yeah,
He's
right.
like, I can't even get through here. I can't do anything with this. and so yeah, instead of, I spent a lot of time dwelling on superheroes and fake people of Star Wars, and what is it over here? Star Wars and Star Trek and Marvel and DC. When we have a whole database, I'm looking at it right now. Personality. I'm going to go through it. Of I'm sure there's tons of other databases too that I could go through, that of saints to dwell on and get interested in.
Yeah, they're so fascinating and just amazing. Just all the stories, and they're all true. Like I'm
Mhm.
I'm a little obsessed with true stories about people who are really good. Because it's, if you look
Hmm.
at the entertainment landscape, this is one of my minor sermons. This is not one of my 5 sermons. This is one of my 25 sermons.
Okay.
The the entertainment world try it becomes interesting through evil. There's this transgressive, like,
Hmm.
break the law and murder people. But I find it really interesting to imagine that by watching somebody else because it's so different, so interesting.
Mhm.
Evil is the lazy way to interesting.
Mm.
It's and that's why, like, when I watched the movie about Gandhi's life and was just riveted, I was like, this is a fascinating story about true goodness, about like heroism. And it's really
Mm.
hard to be so good that you're interesting. And the saints are so good that they're interesting. And I love it.
Ah,
It's so cool. There's this whole army of them.
yeah, man, that is good. Well, and that gives me something to work on between now and the next time we talk. I do want to start looking at who is what how do you say it? My patron saint? No, my is that how you say it? My
The a patron saint is someone that you like really identify with, and
okay.
feels like your your heavenly mentor.
Hmm. Hmm. And that what's interesting about that is that it can help shape, because the first thing comes to mind is you're talking about heavenly mentor, like using, um, well, there's two things. One is Goodwill Hunting. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but
Yeah,
where it's one of my favorite movies, and he has a line where they say, yeah, I don't know, his best friend's talking, like, who do you talk to? Who? He's like, Jefferson, and he's naming all these like
yeah,
authors,
yeah,
and I talk to them all the time. He's like, and that's kind of it's similar, my
totally,
approach at least, to this as the saints. And
totally.
but the other thing, uh the other thing is that I've had this like lifelong yearning and sort of um never really satisfied yearning to be under the tutelage of a good mentor. I've had good mentors, but it's like, actually, maybe it's because, like, growing up in high school, I had all these good mentors. In college, little bit more distance, but after college, it's like, where do you find good mentors? Because they're not getting paid to do it for you anymore. It's like, I had good coaches and teachers, and after college, I think it has been since after college, just this desire and sort of journey to kind of find who's my mentor. But I'm getting so old now, soon I've got to lay down that that gauntlet, and instead look for a mentoree, provide my or at least offer
You don't have
services
to not
as
have a mentor just because you're old. Like the saints, have you heard of spiritual
yeah.
directors? Spiritual direction.
No.
So
Oh
a
yeah, yeah,
spiritual,
yeah. There's like people get degrees in that, right?
I don't think so. It's if just for people who don't know. Um,
Hmm.
a spiritual
Spiritual
director
director.
is usually a priest, but it's somebody who will personally guide a serious spiritual student through
Hmm.
parts of the spiritual path that are like murky and difficult and confusing. It's like a priest who will give personal attention to somebody who really, really cares. It's not just for like go to church on Sundays and do the bare minimum kind of thing. It's for
Hmm.
aspirants. And the
Hmm.
saints, very often, even the great saints had spiritual directors until they died. the greatest saints ever. They
Really?
yeah, Padre Pio, Mother Teresa, they all had spiritual directors their entire adult lives because it's just helpful to have
Yeah.
a personal confidant, not only to whom you
Yeah.
confess your sins, but who knows you intimately in your situation and has an outside eye on it and can guide you.
Mm. Do you have a spiritual director?
No, I've no, I'm still working on the things that are obvious. I am not confused, but I'm
Heck, I mean, that sounds interesting and inviting, man. That sounds like something I'd be interested in
yeah, by all means, check it out, read
seeking
about it.
out. Yeah.
Um,
Do you know somebody who has a spiritual director?
uh,
Or do you know a spiritual director?
I think I know a few priests. I go to one of the best churches I've ever heard of. There's a bunch of priests, and so I imagine that
Okay.
they do spiritual direction for certain people. I don't know who those people are. I would be happy to
Mm.
be one of them. I just haven't felt like a strong impetus to push that, to rush that, and I think
Mm.
probably because I'm afraid it's arrogant. Like I don't want them to think I'm
Mm.
all, you know, I've you know.
Mm.
Anyway, I don't want to be like I'm super awesome. I'm awesome enough to need a spiritual director. Will you be? And I like, um, but that's just my personal issues. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I want
it's a very normal thing. Is the point?
okay. And I wonder, I mean, I wouldn't approach it that way. I would approach it more like I'm a mess and I need a spiritual director, you know?
Yeah,
It's like,
that maybe I should do that.
I
Maybe I
don't
should
know.
because I do feel like a mess.
Oh man. Being a human, I think that's one of the central I don't know. The central element of being a human is messiness.
Yeah, yeah,
Isn't like most of life as a human trying to clean up the messiness, you know? It's like, I mean, if you think about it, just dogs, we have to clean up after dogs. We're the entities that clean up. We have to constantly clean up after ourselves, and,
yeah,
and always working on these little ways to mitigate our messiness. Hmm.
yeah, and yet God's orderliness is bigger than all that, and all the messes
Mm.
are woven into some perfection that we just can't see yet, and that really thrills me.
Amen.
That really,
That's a good thing to end on. I appreciate that. Yes. That vision of God's love and invitation to join his perfection and orderliness, that he's calling that orderliness out of us. That's in there. It's there. And it's exciting that we will one day, that will be manifest.
yeah,
The completion. Yeah.
that's
Well,
a
thank you, brother.
my pleasure, great pleasure.
It's always great talking to you, and hopefully we get another keep this up, because I was thinking
I love
today, I was like,
it.
I can't remember what we were going to talk about. I was like, I
No,
forgot
good.
today. It's Friday.
I like the freshness and not knowing, and it's really good that way.
Yeah, good. I forgot I was going to tell a story about the chicken, but we'll talk about it some of that next week or something.
Okay, I'll pray for your chicken.
All right. Thank you, brother. Rosie.
Thank you, Rosie the chicken. That's
Yeah.
all right. See you later, man.
All right, brother. God bless you. And
God
thank you
bless.
for anybody who's tuned in.